Hey guys, how you doing today? Just got off work. Got a good 3-day stretch coming up. It's gonna be nice. I'd like to start this video by just saying thanks to everybody for being so nice to me over that last video. You know, I felt really awkward about that one, but it was in my head, and it's something I want to talk about on this channel, and it's something I do think is kind of important to talk about. And I was really worried everybody was going to be like, gross, or you're dumb, or what the heck. Unsubscribe, let's get out of here. But everybody was really kind to me about it, and nice, and so that was nice. And I think that's kind of the subject of what I want to talk about today, is something I was thinking about today. Being nice, and how the expectation of being nice, and the expectation of the nice attitude that exists within kind of corporate capitalism. That there's this narrative that exists throughout my entire career, and certainly I've witnessed it over and over again, right? It isn't enough to simply be at the job. It isn't enough to even treat the person you're speaking with just with respect. There's this persona that you must adopt if you are going to succeed in the corporate capitalist space. There's this like unwritten rule set that exists within corporate capitalism. I think the kind of most grotesque version of it, we've all seen this, right? Where you walk into a place and a person's just like, hey, how you doing today? Hey, how you doing today? What can I do for you? Right? That kind of like over the top, bubbly sweetness that is so obviously put on and so obviously fake that I've heard referred to as baby talk for boomers. I thought that was hilarious to hear that, baby talk for boomers, because that's exactly what it is. Anytime I've walked into establishment, I mean, it's one thing because I've worked in these kind of environments my whole life. I've been coached in that kind of environment before. And what's so distressing about that, like, is if the expectation as a person is that the worker is putting on a false representation of themselves, that is obviously false. It's obviously a presentation. It's a performance, right? And what's distressing about that is that performance is not actually respected as work. Recently, Starbucks has offered mental health benefits to its employees. And I think that's strictly because they understand that they are starting to face up to the reality that what the job is emotional labor. That all of the coaching and all of the information they have and all of the structure of the place is built around this idea of forcing their employees to create a false persona and a false personality. And this has an alienating effect on the employee, but it also has an alienating effect on the customer, because the alienating effect for the employee is very obvious, right? They don't get to be themselves the majority of the time. Like, if you're being coached to talk and act and use a different type of language and be a different kind of a person than who you are or what you're doing, it takes effort, it's difficult to do, and it's completely disrespected. There is no respect for the customer service worker who is doing the dance and putting on the show. And the people, and if you get very good at it, like, I'm excellent at customer service. Like, I'm an excellent customer service representative. I consider myself an expert. I only don't consider myself a master because I'm yet to actually train someone to be an expert. And the better you get at it, the less obvious it is that you're doing it. Because the person that you are pretending to be at work becomes closer to the person who you are. And this is called, in the corporate world, they want people to be genuine, right? They're not looking for this guy. Hey, how you doing today? Hey, how can I help you? Oh, you need your double mocha chocolate? Oh yeah, great. Let me help you out with that. That'll be $4.55. Great, thanks for coming. Right? Like, they don't necessarily want that person. Unless that's the person you are, right? If they're talking to you in the back room and you're talking like that, hey, how you doing? Yeah, okay. I'll definitely work on that, Steve. Yeah, for sure. If that's the person you are, then that's the person that you are. But for many baristas and many people who work in customer service, that's a put on. And if you're in customer service, you know it's a put on, and it takes energy and it takes effort. It's tough to do. And big loud vehicle driving by. I'm important. And and so the closer you get to that customer service representative just being yourself, right, and it being a more accurate or more acceptable version of yourself, right, in corporate parlance, right? You can't be yourself, but you can be yourself that is corporate friendly. You have to abide by the unspoken and unwritten rules of corporate speak. There are certain topics you're just not allowed to talk about. There are certain things you're not allowed to engage in if you want to exist in a corporate environment. You have to be a fake person. So, and the better you get at that kind of deception, because it is a deception, that's the whole point, is that you're deceiving people into believing you're someone you're not. You're not yourself, you're just an avatar of whatever corporation you work for. And the justification is, well, we're paying you to be here. It's like, well, yeah, you're paying me to be here. You're not necessarily paying me to be a whole other persona or a whole other person. And where this leads and where it gets scary is that I have met and I know people who eventually the fake person, because you're spending so much time being this fake person in your place of work, eventually that fake person starts to become who you are in your day-to-day life. You start to act that way. And the person you were, or the person you are, gets pushed aside. And you kind of lose the thread of what it means to be an independent person. And you just continuously remain as this avatar of the corporate state. You don't necessarily have the independence is the word that bangs around in my head, but you don't have your individualism. You just become corporate. And then, like, if you're high up, like if you're a manager or something like that, you start to coach people in your day-to-day life, because that's what you do as a manager in your work life. And suddenly everybody becomes the way you understand the world is through the corporate structure, and the way you understand things is through being this false person and this false representation of who you actually are. And you cease being this kind of genuine being in the world, and you just become this corporate avatar walking around. And I've seen it happen, and I've seen the toil and the struggle that people go through who are actively fighting against this phenomenon, right? And I actually think it's easier it is easier for people just to submit and give up and give themselves over to the corporate state. I've seen that happen. I think it's easier for people to do that because then you don't need to worry, right? Then the struggle for individual expression is over. You can just express yourself through the corporation. The struggle for artistic expression is over because you can just express yourself through the corporation. All the struggles are over, right? You can just be rest assured that someone is making decisions on your behalf, and all you have to do is accept that when they say this is what we're going to do, you just have to go, okay, and just go along with it. And don't fight back, and don't push back. And your conscience will be clean. Your inner self will be decluttered, because your inner self is sort of this empty, barren wasteland, right? That's just all you have to worry about are the small demands that the corporation puts on you. Yeah, music break. It's pretty busy down here right now. I guess it's Saturday, right? Saturday afternoon on a beach, right? Makes sense. After I'm done this, I'm going to go grab my puppy and go for a nice walk. Maybe do some yoga on the beach. And that's something that I've been struggling with a little bit myself, is expressing my individualism, expressing myself. I'm glad that I do this because I think that helps a lot. Helps ground me in my inner self, and I don't lose myself so readily to sort of the corporate world and what corporate wants. It's also helpful that I work in a toy store, right? So it's difficult to lose your genuine connection and your genuine self when the people you're talking to mainly are children, because children don't have this ability yet. They don't have this they can't create a false self. They can't create a false version of themselves. The mask doesn't really exist. And so when you're talking to kids, they are themselves. They are their genuine selves. And it's very difficult not to also be your genuine self around kids, because kids see through you. They see through it very easily and very quickly. They know when they're being bullshitted. They know when people are pulling the wool over their eyes and pretending to be something that they're not. They understand. Kids are very skeptical. It's funny, like they're skeptical. And because I'm a large man, right? When I approach kids, it's very common for them to be shy and very common for them to kind of shy away. Something that I'm learning about myself just as a person living in the world is that my size and my presence can be very intimidating. And so I've been working to... This social distancing that we're going through right now as a community has been very helpful for me, because it's helping me to keep that distance and keep things... and to not diminish my presence, but certainly allow other people's presence to exist in the space in equal measure. But I just feel like our workplaces don't need, like, the false niceties that exist between the customer and the employee. I just think that it doesn't need to be so obvious and apparent. Like, when I'm at work, like, I try my best to help people and to get people through, and sometimes you just have to fake the niceness. You do. You just have to fake the niceness, you know? You just don't feel like you really want to be there. You don't feel like you really have the energy or the ability to just, be nice. Uh, and so you have to fake it. That whole fake it till you make it kind of thing. And the customer is there for the show. They don't necessarily, and I think that this is kind of what I'm driving at, I suppose. I think it's disappointing that the people who are in our communities, the people who live in the environment we live in, their interest in you is not to see to your well-being or to ensure that you're taken care of or any of that. It is to have a good time for themselves. And that there's nothing wrong with wanting to have a good time, but if I know for a fact that, like, you are being here's a great example of what I'm talking about. The other day I walked into a wine rack, and it was obvious that the employees there were going through something very stressful. And as a retailer myself, and as someone who lives in this community, I interact with those people on a semi-regular basis. I really did want to investigate, and I really was curious, and I really wanted to delve a little bit deeper. But they were maintaining the veil of professionalism. They were maintaining the barrier that exists between us. And I just guess I didn't have the wherewithal or the strength of character in that moment to pierce through that veil and find the human on the other side, to attempt to offer some level of comfort or solace, or just to hear their story, which oftentimes can be enough. And looking back on it, I wish I had have. I wish I had have pushed a little harder, and I wish I had have dug a little deeper and gotten through the veil of corporate professionalism to the human that was obviously in distress underneath. And then perhaps they wouldn't have appreciated that, because part of living in sort of this corporate capitalist system is to sacrifice yourself to that corporation, that the corporation is your community, that the customers are not your community, the corporation is your community, that the customers are just people you serve. They're not part of a larger system that exists outside of the corporation. And I think that's deeply unfortunate. Really, we have this sort of inverted way of dealing with one another. And I do think that it is inverted. That we should be caring about one another first, and through the caring of one another comes the service. But right now we're serving one another first, and then there's this caring that's, do we ever really reach that? Do we ever get to that? And I really notice it I live in this neighborhood now. You guys have seen me walk home. Like, it takes no time for me to get home. I live right down the street. And I walk by people I serve every single day. And there's something that exists in the brain where there's a compartmentalization, where I know that I know they see me, but it just doesn't register. And that's because I'm not where I'm supposed to be. Because as far as they're concerned, I'm just the toy store guy. I'm just the NPC that lives in the toy store. And they don't really know who I am. That they don't really think of me as an individual with my own ideas and my own thoughts. And they've never really, because when I get into conversations with them, there is a limit to what I am permitted to say. That there is a censorship that exists in the corporate environment. And so that means that I've served people for years who I don't think I've ever met. And maybe I know their name, and maybe they know my name, but I don't think I've ever met them, and I don't think they've ever met me. And if tomorrow I was suddenly swept away in some kind of catastrophe or something like that, maybe the best that I would get is, hey, where'd that guy go? Oh, I shouldn't speak so illy, you know. There was a wonderful woman who used to work at our store. She was the assistant manager at our store, and she, at the age of 58, suddenly died. And the outpour from the community was very inspiring and very beautiful. Well, and so maybe people do care, you know, and they just don't really understand or know how to show it. That we're all just kind of caught in the momentum of this system that we live in, and we don't know how to really improve it, and we don't know how to make things better. We're all just happy that when we go home, we have a certain level of safety and we can get food on our table, and so it seems to make sense to us. And most people are so deep into that momentum of that they can't actually pause to analyze or critique the system that they live in. And someone who does take the time, like myself, to pause and analyze the system that we live in and critique it, what they would say would sound foreign and strange. Because at the end of the day, I do think people, as long as they walk into an establishment and they see smiling faces, even if the smiles are fake, and when they talk to people, they have friendly conversation, even if it's forced and made up, and then they go to work where they feel they're doing something that matters, even though it doesn't, and they go home and they have a roof over their head and they have food in their belly. Well, I think for most people, that's the end of the conversation. That's enough. Why do we need to improve this situation? Why do we need to go any deeper than that? So we live a very kind of superficial existence. And that's really what it is. That the superficial conversations that we have seem to be enough. And to go any deeper than those superficial conversations elicits a kind of fear or a kind of terror just by the act of doing it. And so it's easier to be a fake person than it is to pursue your inner self and your real self. Like, people were screaming to go back to work and screaming for normalcy during this COVID-19 crisis. They couldn't just stay home. They couldn't just deal with themselves. That was much more difficult. It was easier to continue selling themselves to a market that's dominated by billionaires. That was easier for them to do. Huh. Well, I guess that's the end of me. I hope you guys are doing well out there. Like, share, subscribe. Like, share, subscribe. Tell people I exist, I guess. I hope you're all doing well out there. I honestly hope you are. I hope that you're getting something out of this, and I hope that I don't know. I hope that you have an orgasm and get drunk and smoke some weed and have a laugh, play a video game, read a book, watch a movie, go skydiving. I don't know. I don't care. Just anything that you think is going to make your life lighter. Go ahead and do that. I'm on board. Let me know. Let me know. Let me know. What is it you do? What gives you that momentary solace? Because I'm looking for ideas. Always looking for ideas. All right, guys. Have fun out there.